Okay, so today is the anniversary of what? Okay, it's Friday the 13th. Does that help?
I know.
Yes, I know you know because you're one of the other people like Brian that gets it. But you can't pull it out right now.
I know. It's not there.
The 14th of Nisan is
I know this. Yes.
is the day the death angel went over, right? But if you happen to be not Hebrew, Gentile, because it would have been the 13th because it wasn't midnight yet. And in point of fact, it was Friday. So Friday the 13th is when the death angel passed over all of Egypt. So from that day, 3,500 years ago to this, Friday the 13th carries a bad connotation to the Gentiles. Okay, so the Sefer, we talked about the Sefer Bible that Linda has, I think. You have it today, yes? And we talked about, anybody who's interested in getting some, if we order a few together, we can get a little bitty discount. So I sent stuff and I printed stuff. And so anyway, we should consider it. I sent the little write-up on all 10 of the books and on the Sefer Bible and all that stuff. And it's very cool because we got on this subject, as you recall, when I know this is weird, but maybe opened my mouth and said something I don't usually say, and said that the King James Bible originally had 80 books, and we have been ripped off from 14 or 15 of them. And then all of a sudden, sometimes guys are not good at seeing ahead of, just like right past what you say. And so then all these people wanted, well, what do you mean? Or the rest of the books? Well, I don't know, dude. It's over my pay grade. Somebody took them. I don't know. So the Sefer has all those books plus some other ones. And then he's got 10 other books on various things, including he has 2 books that I'm definitely going to get that are the Torah portions, and we went through all the Torah portions, 2 years ago, a year ago, something, 2 years ago. Yeah. And so he's got all the Torah portions and he's got the calendar and all that stuff. That's 2 other books. And so it would be, anyway, he has all sorts of books from the beginning, the fathers, and all of those books contain other books that we typically don't have access to. So I sent all that stuff. I'll make another copy for you guys. And if anybody's interested, I'd like to get, I'd like to get an order together so we could, and if you have any people that still celebrate the pagan holiday of Christmas and need a gift, this would be an excellent gift. Okay, so tonight, everybody knows what this is, yes? Oh, by the way, you guys probably don't know this, but maybe you figured it out. We do this live for people who can't be here or don't want to be here. So that's what that is. So whatever you say, there's, 10 million people listening that actually, are right there with you. They're listening too. So if you get up and do a dance, sometimes we spin this around. But anyway, that's what all this is. So if you can't be here or don't want to be here, you can listen live, or it's also recorded so you can listen to it anytime you want to. So anyway, that's what all this is. And tonight there were, this group is an odd group for me. Well, it's probably an odd group for you too, because you're all, odd. But most of the people in this group, we embrace it. It's perfect for me because there's no one odder than me. This is the first group that I've ever done that has this many mature people in it. And it's nice because you people all know stuff. You've been around, you're smart. It's kind of cool for me. So I'm not fighting battles I don't need to fight. But because we all fit right into that, you're going to die if you get COVID category, which, maybe we're all going to die. There are people here, and that's why I sent that thing out this morning in case, anybody was a little sketchy about it. And I get it. I mean, I don't really get it. I don't get sick, but I can imagine that I wouldn't want to be sick. And if people have, conditions or whatever, and they're uncomfortable, that's fine. So hopefully they're watching online and okay. So there's,
the Lord takes us, not COVID.
Yeah, the Lord takes us, not COVID. And yet I still don't want to be sick until the Lord takes me, if that's cool. Now, like I say, I don't get sick, so I'm not maybe the best guy to ask on that. Okay, so look, here's the deal. Let's go back to this. What's that? They can see this, right? Okay, what's that? And anybody online can type it in. What is that? Okay, that is a ship. You all get partial credit. It's a wooden ship.
Yes.
And it sailed over here in 1620.
Mayflower?
Thank you. That,
Oh, that is?
well, that's the Mayflower 2. But that's what the Mayflower looked like. So there's another picture of the Mayflower. That's the Mayflower 2 under sail. That's actually what the ship looked like. Then there's another picture. Okay, they were on this for 66 days. And they left late because the Speedwell was supposed to go with them, and it was unseaworthy, as it turned out. So by the time they left, it was in the storm season. So they sailed over here 66 days at the wrong time of year in really bad weather, up and down. And you see all the bathrooms in there?
No.
Okay, there aren't any. So picture this. You've got 102 pilgrims and strangers, they call them, 102 pilgrims and strangers, that have probably never really been on a boat, certainly not for 66 days in the middle of the Atlantic, tossing and turning and puking and doing all that stuff. And, you know, we're used to nice, luxurious cabins and
Yeah.
just like home. They had a bucket.
Yeah.
Okay. So you use the bucket while the ship's, you know, and there's men and women and kids. And I mean, just think about really what an awful deal that must have been.
Ceiling's about 4 feet high.
Yeah, they're very short, but they were small people. Okay, so there's one more. Those are the guys that built the Mayflower 2, because it's all made by hand and it's all made out of wood. And I didn't count them all. I think there's like 44 people there. That is how big the boat is. There were 102 passengers plus the crew on this boat for 66 days, puking. And I mean, that's the deal.
They got so sick.
Well, that didn't help. And they got here at the wrong time of year. Okay, so why do I mention that? Man, no,
Why?
because the Mayflower is famous for the Mayflower Compact, right? The first document written in these to be United States that was an official document. I mean, an official way, this is how we're going to govern ourselves. And that had to happen because these guys had sailed. The deal was, we're sailing to Virginia and we're going to start a little community there. And Virginia was a commonwealth of the crown. And they landed, and where they landed, they couldn't live. So they sailed 300 miles up the coast. They were no longer in Virginia. They were no longer under the control of the crown or anybody. They were in the wilderness. So it dawned on these guys before they landed, they needed to have some kind of protocols to deal, because there were 42 or something, less than half of the 102 people were pilgrims, or, you know, they were Christians seeking a place to be able to worship freely. The other group of them, which was slightly more than half, they called strangers. And they were there because they saw this as an opportunity to make money. They weren't religious at all. There was craftsmen and farmers and, you know, just people who could. Okay, so they were now outside of the realm of the crown. There was no law. They didn't know what to do. So they sat down and they wrote this agreement between the two parties, between the pilgrims and the strangers, because they were both smart enough to know they couldn't survive on their own without each other. But they believed completely different things. So they had to come up with a system that would allow them all to live. So they wrote the Mayflower Compact. And it'll take me about an hour and a half to read this, but I'm going to read it anyway. It starts this way, and it says, "In the name of God, amen. We whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord, King James, by the grace of God of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, defender of the faith, etc., having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith and the honor of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these presents solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and of one another, covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, by the virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such and just and equal laws, ordinance, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time as shall be thought most meet and covenant for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness thereof, we have hereunder described or subscribed our names at Cape Cod, which is what they called it, the 11th day of November, new style, November 21st, in the year of the reign of our sovereign Lord King James of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th of Scotland, the 54th, in the year 1620. So 400 years ago, Wednesday, is when this was written. And everybody talks about the Mayflower Compact and, oh, it's, you know, that's it. That's all there is. That's the document. And all it says is, look, we need to help each other out. We don't need to fight over stuff. And I'm thinking, my gosh, why don't we have something like that today? You know, they couldn't be more opposite, these two groups of people. They had completely different aims, completely different interests. And yet they realized they needed to work together to make this work, or they would all die. So that's what the Mayflower Compact is all about. It's not really some big document that, you know, like the Magna Carta and everything's built off that. It's just an agreement between dissimilar people that we need to get along for the betterment of the community. So that was 400 years ago. And if a week is to if a day is to 1,000 years, then this was about 10 hours ago on Yahweh's clock. So my question is, how have we gone from a nation founded to follow God to where we are now in the internet, in this, well, that's probably part of it, in this short amount of time, in 400 years. It's just, it's unbelievable, because it took, even from Adam to Noah was 1,500 years. Adam walked in the cool of the afternoon with God, and then 1,500 years later, things had gone so bad that God just destroyed it all. It only took us 400 years. So we are a lot more advanced thanks to the internet. Okay. So look, as we consider the Bible, and we all know this to be true, but I think forget it sometimes and don't really apply it this way. The Bible is a personal message to you and to you and to you and to you, to all of us. It's a personal message to each one of us. It instructs us how we are to live. And yet often we take the things in the Bible and we're more than happy to beat other people over the head with it and say, this is how you must be. The Bible doesn't care how they must be. How they act is between them and God. How we act is between us and God. So Matthew 7:5, just as a reminder, thou hypocrite, first cast the beam out of thine own eye, and then thou shalt see clearly to cast the mote out of thy brother's eye. That's the way the Bible works. And it's interesting to compare those two groups of people on the Mayflower. And granted, they had 66 days together in pretty adverse conditions, pretty tight conditions, to come to know each other's character. And however that worked out, they came to the realization that they all needed each other. Everybody has a gift from God, whether they know it or not. And those gifts need to be used together if the body's to live. But individually, we have to follow after the things the Lord calls us to do. And none of us are going to know everything, and none of us are going to do everything, and none of us are going to be perfect and wonderful and fabulous. But we've all have things that the Lord imprints on us. And that's why he's made us all different, because we have different interests and different needs and different desires, and we think differently, and we act differently, and we speak differently. And all those things are good and on purpose, because as a group, just like those people on the boat, as a group, we can make a life. Individually, it would be much harder. So, the Bible asks us not so much to beat people over the head with his word, but to act in such a way that attracts people to us, and, you know, not to alienate people from us. So my question would be, you know, and there's no answer to this. There's no right or wrong answer. You won't be judged. You can still have another piece of cake. And by the way, those who decided not to come tonight, I could do the math. And basically, the math turns out this way. You're playing the odds to stay safe, but you missed 100%. You missed Andrea's chocolate fudge birthday cake and Dan's chocolate mayonnaise cake. So weigh that out to see if it was worth it. Okay. I personally don't think it was, but all right. So stay with me here a moment. What does this mean today? This is going to be a long way around the barn. I have noticed in the past, but even more today, there's a certain similarity between those people who believe themselves to be Christians, that is, the people who say they follow after the Lord, they follow His commandments and instructions and judgments. At the same time supporting, killing our children, homosexual marriage, removing Yahweh from public discourse, closing down churches, all that stuff. But there's a certain relationship between people like that and the people who say we live in a democracy. Neither are true, right? You can't follow His instructions, judgments, and statutes and then not follow them. The two things are not comparable. You need to understand what His instructions are and then choose to follow them. It's pretty simple. And in the same way, I have heard, and we go through this little sermon often around here because there will be times like this time when everybody on the news, the politicians, the newscasters, the pundits, the man on the street, they're all saying the same thing. They're talking about our democracy. And to me, it's like fingernails across the blackboard. These people are idiots. They should, if you are a professional newscaster making millions of dollars a year as the, whoever they are, leader of the evening news, or if you're a state senator or a presidential candidate, you damn well better know this is a republic, not a democracy. And I hear Schumer and Pelosi and Feinstein, Biden, Harris, Clinton, they're all saying our democracy is being destroyed. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic. So it's always, and the reason I tie these two groups of people together, the people who don't know our system of government and the people who don't know the system the Lord put in place, it's because these people, the Clintons and Schumers and Pelosi's and Feinsteins and Harris's and our neighbors, these are the ones that are on TV talking about we're destroying our democracy while they're genuflecting and talking about the power of their faith, of their Catholic faith or their Methodist faith. Which is it? Okay. So these guys, oh my gosh, they seem to be working full time for Satan as far as I'm concerned. And it's easy to see for those people. It's easy for me to point out. And it's easy for everybody to go, oh yeah, that's terrible. They're just hypocrites and all that. But there are all kinds of people in our neighborhood and our family that we know, maybe even some pastors that we know that are like this. So how do we deal with that? It's easy to point fingers at all those idiots on TV, but it's a lot harder when they're your family, your friends, your neighbors. And you've already learned, and we already know that our actions are to be conducted in such a way as to attract these people. I can't just go out there and tell them you're a moron. You don't know history. You don't know the Bible. You're going to burn in hell under Biden. That's not going to get me anywhere. But there needs to be a way. So I want to read a couple other things. Proverbs 17:15. I'm reading this every week just because it's important. He that justifies the wicked and he that condemneth the just, even they both are an abomination to Jehovah. An abomination is that word that means disgusting. Okay, so here's the message. 2 Timothy, starting in chapter 3, verse 1. It's up there, I think. Yes? Okay. So I might add a little. There we go. Know this also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. Okay, I think we can all agree that perilous times will come and are here and they're going to get much more perilous. But this is true for everyone, right? Whether you're the fake Christian, whether you're satanic, whether you follow Yahweh to the greatest extent, these perilous times are coming. And it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or Christian or a wannabe or neither or nothing or anything. These times are coming. And I know they're coming because the verse goes on, men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. Is any of this ringing true? You know anybody like that on TV or running for office or even maybe in the neighborhood? They are false accusers. They are incontinent, which just means they have no control. They are fierce, despisers of those that are good. They are traitors, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. Well, it's a description of a lot of people. But yeah, exactly. What do you see? You see that. And the reason you see that is because God saw it, knew it, and had it written down. It's not that he wrote it and they're becoming that way. So, don't miss this. These things are not here because God wrote it all out and it's going to be this way. And he's somehow forcing us into this little cattle guard thing where we're becoming this. We became this and he wrote it. It's not, he's not sticking to the script. He's just telling us what we're going to be because he's outside of time and space. He saw all this, what we would think of as before it happened. But we're living through it and he's telling us what's going to happen. And that's what's going to happen. And if we look around, it's clear that's what's happening. So Timothy adds to this, the last part of the verse, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And again, I keep seeing this, Pelosi and Feinstein, they're all genuflecting at somebody's funeral, and they all talk about how important their faith is to them and how they went to their Catholic schools. Really? Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And then Timothy says, from such as these turn away. And I struggle with that. Because what does he mean exactly? It's not like we can avoid these people. They're everywhere. And I don't think the Lord wants us to avoid them. I mean, it was Yeshua himself who said in the actual Lord's Prayer that we are to be in the world, but not of the world. Right? We're to be lights. If we're to attract people to him, we have to be in the world. We have to interact with these people. So what does Timothy say or mean when he says, from such, turn away? And of course, I don't know, but we'll look into it. So when we're speaking of all these things, especially the plank in your own eye, there's a thing called now the Trump Accountability Project. And let me just read to you some of the things it says. We must never forget those who furthered the Trump agenda, it says. We should not allow, now get this, we should not allow the following groups of people to profit from their experience. The first group of people are those who elected him. So just know that these so-called genuflecting Christians and newscasters and pagans and godless, they're coming after you. We should not allow these people to profit from their experience. The first group, those who elected him, those who staffed his government, those who funded him. It goes on to say, we should welcome our fellow Americans with whom we differ politically, of course, as long as they change and become what the Dems want us to be. But those who took a paycheck from the Trump administration should not profit from their efforts to tear our democracy apart. Well, we don't have a democracy, for one. Okay, the word we should never forget those people who, when faced with a decision, chose to put their money, their time, their reputations behind separating children from families, encouraging racism, anti-Semitism. You might recall that the squad is extremely anti-Semitic. Yeah, negligent. Oh, and get this, negligently causing unnecessary loss of life and economic devastation from our country's failed response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we sit here right now, we just discussed this earlier. If you get, and you guys on TV didn't get this part, if you get COVID and you need to be fixed, hydroxychloroquine will fix it in a day. Budesonide will fix it in a day. Ivermectin will fix it in a day. And our Democratic governor has made it illegal for us to obtain the solution, even if your doctor prescribes it. So what do? And I've said this in the past, the smart thing to do would be to talk to your doctor ahead of time, like I did, and say, do you agree that hydroxychloroquine could, or whatever, what would you think, so my doctor says, absolutely, hydroxychloroquine is great, but I can't prescribe it to you in this state. So you just find a place like in Kansas, like I found, that doesn't have a Democratic governor, that has not made that illegal, and she'll send the prescription to them and they'll send me the medicine. Jordan's friend who got COVID, what? Yeah, no, I don't even know her name. Its name, I don't know. That person who got this, and I think I mentioned this, her family is from some Republican state. The family doctor, mom went to the family doctor, said, hey, this is the deal. He wrote her out a prescription for hydroxychloroquine, sent it, she had it the next day, took a couple of pills and was, boom, fixed, just like Trump, boom, fixed. It's easy to fix this. So you should, and this is off the subject, but you should, especially at our age, it's worth doing. Talk to your doctor ahead of time, right? And then I was reading today, doing some other research in a completely unrelated field, and discovered that HHS, Health and Human Services, has passed a law, I guess, that says telemedic, you call a doctor, telemedics you can use in a different state. So all you have to do is call a doctor, describe your symptoms. If he agrees and prescribes you any of those three things or anything else that's legal to ship, you can have it, the next day, because UPS is awesome. You can get it the next day. So that is legal. And apparently this doctor, who's, if he was her doctor or his doctor or its doctor, is up there, in age, so he probably didn't know that. But HHS, Health and Human Services, has passed a law, ordinance, whatever it is, I don't know what you call it when it's not passed by the government legislator, that says telemedicine is fine. You can go get your prescription anywhere you want, and if the doctor will prescribe it, it can be sent to you. So don't necessarily think Jared Polis will be able to kill you, because there are ways around it. Okay, so anyway, these people listed above that we were talking about, the whatever it is, the Trump Accountability Project, they're going to play on the hearts and minds of everybody. I mean, even people, there will be people who they will be able to convince, even, conservatives, maybe Christians, they'll be able to convince that, oh yeah, we shouldn't associate with those conservative types. They're going to create lies and false images, and they're going to trap some people. They already believe this, but they're going to take some of us, and there will be people from our groups somewhere that will say, oh yeah, we shouldn't reward those people for actually voting what they thought was the best. So Timothy says, from these turn away. Well, what does that mean? And I would suggest that we can just as easily become deaf listening to the other side say these things and scream and lie and all those things Timothy said. That's those people. They're doing that. And we can become deaf to that because it's just so much noise. But I would suggest there is just as much noise coming from the other side, and we can be just as deafened by all the cheating and the computer fraud and all of, and I believe all of that is true, but there's noise on both sides, and it is deafening. And it's making so much noise that for us to stay focused on the Lord is harder and harder and harder. And we need to we just need to make sure that we're not sucked one way or the other. We need to be, you can talk Republican or Democrat or honest or dishonest or worthy or unworthy, but none of that's true or matters. There's only two choices. It's either Jehovah or it's the enemy. So which is it? And all this noise that we're surrounded by 24 hours a day makes no difference. We need to focus on the things of the Lord. What did he say? What is he going to do? What is his reaction to us? Not to the world. I mean, we just need to take an honest look at our life for the last 2 weeks and see, where have we spent most of our time? Has it been in prayer that, the Lord's on this, which of course he is on this, or that, that justice will be served, or the unjust will be thrown in jail, or, and none of that's ever going to happen. But all of this, I'm convinced, is on purpose. It's to keep our eye off the ball. And I get stuff from Christians, Christian friends of mine all the time. I mean, every day I get emails. Oh, did you see this? Did you see that? This is happening. This, okay, great. I'm sure it's happening, and I'm sure it's, and it's good. And maybe Trump will be elected. Maybe he won't. I don't know. But I think sometimes it's easy to lose our focus. So, but at the same time, I want you to see what's happening. Because we are in an age, a physical age, most of us, where this just seems impossible. How can people be this way? Because they didn't seem to be that way when we were young. I mean, we had our differences and stuff, but they just weren't evil like this. They just weren't lying in your face. And maybe they were, I don't know. But it just seems like today our generation is lost. We don't even know how to deal with this kind of dishonesty and injustice, and because it's just so foreign to us. We've never lived that way, or never had to live that way. So I want to, on one hand, I do want to share some of this, and on the other hand, I really don't. But I want you to get that this is really happening. This is not, this is not my fantasy or whatever. But for instance, former Clinton press secretary Joe Lockhart tweeted, "The people around @RealDonaldTrump," which I guess is Trump's official website or something. Okay. Apparently it's his Twitter handle. I don't know what that is, but okay. So the people the people around @RealDonaldTrump, who obviously are people who believe, no, they're people who believe, like, I think it's his, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, it's something that if you like Trump, you would follow, apparently. It's his account. Yeah, blog, tweet. Okay, all right. It's the things Trump says. If you're the kind of person that actually is tuned into that and listens because you're @RealDonaldTrump, then these are the people who have enabled him to bring our democracy to the brink, and they need to be held responsible. They're coming after you, and they do not know that this is a republic. But the people who are actually burning and looting and raping and murdering and setting things on fire and stuff, they don't have to be held accountable, apparently. It's just us who have brought the democracy to the brink.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are idiots. And they tell me I'm not supposed to say that anymore, but how else do you describe this? Okay, so what is it that these evil, vile, horrible people @RealDonaldTrump did that deserve all this, that deserve them to come after us? Well, they voted for the candidate they thought best represented their views.
Christians too.
Of course.
Coming after Christians.
Yep. Well, most Christians would fall into that category. So these guys are coming after the basic foundation of our republic. because they're a godless, soulless mob democracy. And back in the 1800s, one of the, they were so much more eloquent back then. You read what they wrote and it's just fabulous. And one of these guys was describing democracy, and he described it as a mobocracy, because that's really what a democracy is, right? Democracy says whoever has the most votes wins. But a republic isn't that way. There's law and order, and there's all sorts of things. So he termed it as a mobocracy. And it's, we seem to be responding sort of like, you're looking at God going, did you see what happened? And he's going, no, what happened? As though he didn't see this, and we have to tell him what's going on. Well, I mean, that's, nobody really believes that, but that's how we act sometimes. These are the godless people that Timothy was talking about, I think. So the better question, I would think, that I've been asking myself, or, with God, is, God, in light of all this that's going on, and thank you, by the way, for letting it happen, show me your plan to bring people to you. Because none of this has escaped him. He knew exactly what was going to happen long before it happened, and he already has a plan. And we're the ones who are all panicked. Oh, it's the voting machines. It's the illegal votes. It's the, well, all of those things are true. And it's all those godless Democrats that are talking about all this. Well, all of that's true too. But that's not the point. God is using all of this to fulfill what he wants. So the question should be, how can we get behind God on this? It doesn't matter if Trump wins, Biden wins, if the world blows up in a big nuclear conflagration or whatever. What matters is, what's the Lord doing to bring people to him, and how can we get involved in that? Because that's the only purpose for any of this. If he couldn't bring people to him, and if he couldn't use us to do it, he would just end it all anyway. There would be no point in it. But he's letting this play out. And he's letting it play out for one reason, because it's going to be useful. He's going to allow us to show people him, right? They're going to see him in the way we live and the way we act, and people are going to come to know him. And it's, we still live in our bubble and everything's fine, but it's going to get worse. And we've read everything that happens before the, quote unquote rapture, if that's in Revelation 14. There's a significant amount of bad things that happen, and we will be here for that. And it's not the tribulation. I mean, it's not the wrath. It's a little tribulation. We'll be here for that. And I think we're at the leading edge of it, and stuff's going to get much worse. Stuff already is much worse in most places. Like I say, we just live in this little isolated bubble up here. But what should we do? I mean, what would God have for us? Because we all know people, and certainly, it's easy to, like in a group like this, so we can come feel safe because we all believe the same thing, and God's looking out for us and all that, which is true. And 2 kinds of chocolate cake. So that's easy. But what about when we're at the store, when we're at work, or, our neighbor? Those people need God. And we're the avenue, we are the avenue for them to find God, right? Because who else is there? We're the people God has put in the midst of that. So when Timothy is saying, from these stay away or avoid, or whatever he said, turn away, don't have anything to do with, he doesn't mean that we need to, batten down in some monastery somewhere. He just means don't let their stuff get on us. We don't need to believe the crap of the world, and we don't even need to think it through. There's nothing there that's truthful. There's nothing there that's useful. We just need to make sure that the world doesn't sully us. But we have to stay in the world for all those people, right? Because God has a plan. If they were not going to be saved, if no one was ever going to come to him again, he'd just wrap it all up. There'd be no purpose in all this. But there are years, maybe just a couple, maybe more. There are years to come, and things are going to get worse. And the worse it gets, the more people find a need for the Lord. And when those people start finding a need for the Lord, they're going to look around. And are they going to go to their neighbor's house with all the Tibetan prayer flags because, oh, they're so pious? Or are they going to, where are they going to go? Well, they're going to come to us, right? Because we've conducted ourselves in such a way, hopefully, and we seem to know stuff, and we're comfortable with all the junk that's going on because we already know the end. We're the people they're going to come to. That's kind of the point, isn't it? So from these, you should avoid, well, just avoid getting the world on you. Don't avoid the people, because the people need to see God, and they're going to see him through us.
I've been hearing so much about an uprising.
Yeah.
Christians, what's the word I'm looking for?
Revolution or,
Revival. There you go.
oh, okay, revival.
Yes.
Yes, well, there's a huge revival going on.
And it seemed like it was important from the way that our political system ended up, that we were supposed to already be in a revival.
Right.
And of course, I don't see it, but everybody keeps talking about
It's
it.
going on.
It's got to be going on.
Well, yeah, there's one guy we listen to, a pastor in Hawaii, and he's part of, I don't know what all he's part of, but his broadcasts are online. It goes all over the world and all that stuff. And he says since COVID, there have been 500,000 people come to the Lord just on the internet, right? Listening to him and the other guys that are on whatever this group is. And a friend of mine was in Washington, D.C. for the thing. And,
Yes.
there's 60,000 people, and people come to the Lord left and right. And all this stuff is going on. And we live in this little bubble. We don't get to see it. Bless you. That was not a street sweeper. That was my wife.
Wife who sneezes delicate.
Yeah, my delicate. Yes. Okay. Enough there. All right. So anyway, the point is there is a huge revival going on. And that's typical when things go bad, right? The church grows best in the dark. Well, if everything's good, nothing's going to happen. We need a little chaos to shake things up. We need people to find themselves in a spot where they have nothing to look forward to, don't even know what they're going to do, and they're going to turn to God. And I don't know how any of you came to know the Lord, but many people came to know the Lord when things were bad, when something happened. Maybe it was a sickness, maybe it was an event, whatever. We see him best when things are not at their best, right? When things are not going as we had hoped that they would, often that's the place that we find the Lord. Bill?
Some 49 years ago, a mother-in-law came out to her porch. We had been visiting, and I was out on the porch drinking.
You told us.
Yeah.
You told us that.
And it was a good story.
And I laughed at her. What I'm saying is, if the Lord tells you to do something,
Yeah, do it.
regardless of what the person
Exactly.
because the purpose is to get the message out.
Right.
My mother-in-law went through that and broke her heart. A week later, because of what she did, I was born again,
Amen.
So, if they meet somebody like I used to be, don't turn away from them.
Right, exactly.
Preach the word to them.
Yeah. And they might go their own way, and that's fine, but somebody else, some
Well,
plant, some water, some harvest.
during that time, I don't know if any of you were ever participating of the charismatic movement back in the 70s. It was huge.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, everybody, was praying in tongues and getting healing, and people were so open to the gospel, but it just kind of fizzed off.
Well, I think they went to different churches.
All
Dan doesn't remember the 70s.
So that's what I'm wondering, how this second
Yeah.
movement, or
Yeah.
if it is even a second, I don't know, about this revival. God
Mhm.
is stirring up his people.
He is stirring up his people.
And yes,
And he has to have chaos. Nothing happens if everything's great.
uh-huh.
If Trump won and our lives were just dandy and we're making tons of money, and we wouldn't be out even looking for people. Now they're going to be fighting us because all of a sudden they're going to be taxed to death. They're going to lose their jobs. They're going to lose their house. All the people from the cities are moving out here, and, things are going to get rough. And that's good, because things have to be rough for God to do his thing and for us to be okay. So let me just continue on about this is what's coming, because I think it's interesting. Maybe you won't. I don't know. Typically, when we're talking to especially now, and I've pulled this, I can't tell you how many times already. When I'm talking to people and I'm not sure where they are with the Lord or whatever, I start talking to them about things that they may not know. And I try to find out, just sort of feel them out, see where they are, what they're interested in. And one of those things I use is a democracy thing, because you don't ever have to go more than about 30 seconds before some person on TV with no brains is talking about our democracy, right? And so it's easy to quote the latest fool, Cuomo or Biden, or, they've all said it, who's talking about our democracy. And I will typically bring up what they said, and, oh, yeah, okay. I said, we don't live in a democracy, right? We live in a republic. And it's amazing how many people don't know that. And I guess it's
Because they're hearing it.
oh yeah, and they didn't, it's like the most boring class you ever took in junior high, and I was the only guy in the room that was interested, because I like that sort of thing, right? So it was interesting, and I've done this research for years and know this by heart, but you read the book that I can't even think of the name now, that Brezhnev wrote, after Reagan and all that stuff, and I can't think of the name now. Anyway, Mao and Stalin, and anybody who's any dictator who's ever taken over a country and subjugated people and murdered millions of people, they all say the same thing. You have to first have a democracy. You have to get rid of this idea of a republic, convert it into a democracy, and then become socialist or communist. You can't go from republic to communist. You have to go from democracy to communist. So I wanted to read, and there are thousands of these, and I just love them to death. This is Lord Acton, who is an English guy, born in 1834. He said, the one prevailing evil of democracy is the tyranny of the majority, or rather the party that not always the majority, that succeeds by force or fraud in carrying the elections. G.K. Chesterton in the 20th century, you can never have a revolution in order to establish a democracy. You must have a democracy in order to establish a revolution. Historians Charles and Mary Beard wrote a book called America in Mid-Passage. At no time, at no place, in solemn convention assembled, through no chosen agents, had the American people officially proclaimed the United States to be a democracy. The Constitution did not contain the word, or any word, lending countenance to it, except the possible mention of we the people in the preamble. When the Constitution was framed, no respectable person called himself or herself a Democrat. Clarence Mannion, the dean of Notre Dame Law School, the honest and serious student of American history will recall that our founding fathers managed to write both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution without using the term democracy even once. James Russell Lowe warned that democracy, and this is great, democracy gives every man the right to be his own oppressor. Ralph Waldo Emerson, democracy becomes a government of bullies tempered by editors. So, it's this, that's why I like using this, because most people don't know that. You can establish a baseline that they know now is true, and then you can start talking to them about other things that you've, which obviously leads to the Lord and the way things are and why things are this way. And, maybe this would be a good time for you to meet the Lord. And you talk to people and they get this, oh, that can't happen here mentality, right? That'll never happen in America. Even though it's happening, it's right in front of you. And the people who are doing it are telling you what they're doing. They still don't believe, oh, that can't happen here. Well, here's what's coming. MSNBC host Chris Hayes and former Labor Secretary Robert B. Reich want, and this is the term I was searching for a couple of weeks ago, want truth and reconciliation commissions to become all over the land. And truth and reconciliation commissions or committees were started every time there's a despot who's overthrown and the new government comes in and they feel the need to punish all the old people. If you supported, it became famous in South Africa because if you supported apartheid, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee's coming after you and you're going to pay because you supported apartheid. And, Idi Amin and the guy in Argentina and Chile, and every country that's ever had a revolution forms the equivalent of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And they say it's to smooth things because, the country's so divided. And maybe you've heard that. So the best way to get rid of a divided country is to kill all the people that don't agree with you, right? So that's the purpose of a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. So it's coming. So they want, truth, right? They want truth. Well, whose truth? It's their truth. It's not your truth. It's not the Bible's truth. There's no discussion about it. What they say to be true is true. And if you don't believe it, you get reconciliated, right? You're toast, dude. And that's what they're asking for. That's what they want. That's coming. And basically all it does is in most countries, it just exchanges one godless dictatorship for another. Well, yeah, it's insane. Okay. James Madison, the father of the Constitution in Federalist number 10, democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention and have never been found or have always been found incompatible with personal security, with the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they are violent in their deaths. Okay, AOC said, you remember AOC used to work in a hot dog cart and she was fired for incompetence. Okay, so she's now saying, is anyone archiving these Trump psychopaths? Who even knew she knew a word like that? When they're trying to downplay or deny their complicity in the future? And then Michael Simon, former Obama staffer, says, oh, yes, we are. It's the Trump Accountability Project. It's the call to arms for, so that's what I mean. You say, wow, like, oh my gosh, I'd never heard. This is coming. This is the new reality. And this is what's happening in big cities. We live up here, it's a big deal when the everything store runs out of rubber bouncing balls or something, this is our reality. But for most of the world, the reality is this is here. These people are out there. Okay, Fisher Ames, this is one of my favorites. Fisher Ames is a great guy. If you only had one book that was not spiritual to read the book about Fisher Ames because he's like Churchill. He just has the best quotes. And he was a congressman for the 8 years of the Washington administration and was a signer of the Massachusetts Convention. He said, democracy in its best state is but the politics of bedlam. While kept chained, its thoughts are frantic, but when it breaks loose, it kills the keeper, burns the building, and perishes. He's awesome. Okay, so Democrats and Republicans. That's where those names came from. So we think, oh, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Do you know what it even means? If you say you're a Democrat, that's what it means. That's what democracy is. It's ruled by the mob. And if you honestly think that's the way you want to live your life, how soon do you think it will be before they turn on you? Right now we're the focus. Then they get rid of us They're going to turn on you because they don't like you because the car you drive, a word you said, the shoes you wear. It doesn't matter. They always have to have somebody to hate. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so one is about the rule of the law or the Torah, and the other is about chaos and anarchy. So how can you really say you want to be a Democrat? All right, Genesis, let's get back to a Bible study here. And I have thousands more of these if you'd enjoyed them. Genesis 6, 5 and 8. No, 5 through 8. It says, and God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his hearts was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on earth and grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man who I have created in the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping things and fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Okay, it took 10 generations or 1,453 years or something from Adam to Noah for them to go from walking with God in the cool of the afternoon in the garden to, I need to destroy these guys because they're just continually evil. 1,400 years. That doesn't even seem possible. Well, we've had 2,000 years since the crucifixion. We're doing pretty good compared to those guys, right? But the time is up. We find ourselves in the same spot that Noah found himself, when the hearts of most men are just continually evil. And you see it on TV. These people are lying when they don't even have to lie. It's just, that's the way they are. They're just evil. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because my mother's great aunt's uncle's nephew's third cousin, 15 people removed back, might have been a slave on a plantation. So I'm going to burn your store down. All right, now look, we have been talking about extra biblical books, and I think that's a pejorative term, actually. So I want to read from one of those. It's called The Book of the Teaching of the 12. And this is chapter 3 that I want to read to you. And this is not a book that's in the canon of Scripture. It's a extra biblical book, they would call it. And I want you to see, as I read this, I want you to find one thing in here that you don't know to be true from the Scriptures. So when I talk about these extra biblical books, don't be thinking it's like some, I mean, some of them are, there's no question. But most of these things, this is what I mean by an extra biblical book. Chapter 3 of the Teaching of the 12. Beloved, free from evil and from every appearance of evil, do not be ruled by your passions, for this leads to murder. Neither be jealous, quarrelsome, or quick-tempered, for murders are born out of such things. Do not let yourself develop lust, for this leads to sexual immorality. Do not be foul-mouthed, nor raise your eyes, for this leads to adultery. Beloved, do not regard omens, for this leads to idolatry. Do not be a sorcerer, nor be involved in astrology or magic purifications. Do not desire to see these things, for that is how idolatry comes. Beloved, don't be a liar, for lying leads to thievery. Do not be fond of money, and do not try to build your own images, for that also leads to thievery. Beloved, don't be a grumbler, for it leads to blasphemy. Do not be self-willed, nor entertain evil thoughts, for that is how blasphemy starts. Be meek, for the meek shall inherit the earth. Be patient and long-suffering, devoid of evil, gentle and good, and trembling continually at the words that you have heard. Do not exalt yourself, nor act presumptuously. Do not join yourself with the proud, but walk with the righteous and humble men, and accept everything that happens to you as good, knowing nothing happens apart from Yahweh. I mean, that's awesome, right? There's nothing in there that you don't know to be true. And it ends, accept everything that happens to you as good. And that's true. We need to do that. We need to accept everything that is happening is good, because certainly nothing happens apart from the knowledge of God. So it's interesting in the next week or so, the things that are going to happen, but don't get excited, don't get riled, don't get, none of this is going to take the Lord as a surprise. Judicial Watch has found that 320, and Judicial Watch is actually a pretty good company. They're not typically the flamethrowers and the liars, and they glean their material from public record. They go to under the Freedom of Information Act and they request stuff, and they have some sort of they're able to get stuff that most companies are not able to get, partially due to their past record of being honest and truthful. They just report the truth. So they found that in 328 counties in the United States, more people are registered to vote than are eligible to vote. So in these 328 counties, they found 1.8 million people that are registered to vote, more than are legal to vote. And nationwide, they've found 3.5 million people registered to vote, 3.5 million more people registered to vote than there are people legally able to vote. One of the most corrupt states in the nation, there are 3 really bad states for this, about the most corrupt state is Colorado. Every county in Colorado has more than 100% registered voters. There are more registered voters in every single county in Colorado than there are than there are people legal to vote, eligible voters. Thank you. Every single county. So think about that. How does that happen? No, it's not got anything to do with voting. It has to do with, in Eagle County, there are, I don't know what the number is, say there are 100,000 people eligible to vote. Now, most of those, or not most, some of those people won't register. Some of them don't vote. It doesn't have anything to do with that. There are, and this isn't the number, but say there's 100,000 people in Eagle County that are legally eligible to vote. They're legal citizens. They're over 18. They are, I don't even know what the criteria are. Yeah, not felons. They meet the criteria to vote. So say there are 100,000 people that meet the criteria to vote. In Eagle County, 104,000 people are registered to vote. Now, out of the 100,000, there's a good percentage, and that percentage is about 30. 30% of those people won't register anyway because they just don't vote. So you have 70,000 people, say, that would vote in Eagle County out of 100,000. In Eagle County now, instead of 70,000, you have 104,000 people that can or will vote. So when you get to some of these counties where it's like 176%, the numbers start to be staggering. If only 24% of the registered voters are actually legal voters, 3/4 of the ballots aren't real? How is that possible? And it's democracy. It's exactly right. It's like he said, whether they're the majority or not, they're the loudest and they get their way. That's a democracy. That's a mobocracy. So how do you get to the point where you have more registered voters than you have legal voters? Some of it is just laziness. You don't take people who have died off the voter rolls. You don't take people who have moved off the voter rolls. But oddly, the only lazy people are Democrats. Because in Republican counties, you die, boom, you're gone. It was Richard Daley who in the 60s and 70s coined the phrase, vote early and vote often, right? In every state, in every Democratic state this year, there have been many, many, many people who have died, lifelong Republicans have passed, and they've come back to vote Democrat. And it's amazing that everyone who comes back from the dead, everyone, without exception in any state, everyone who comes back from the dead to vote, votes Democrat. So I'm not certain if that's telling us something about heaven or perhaps maybe about hell, but they all vote Democrat. So why is it that the Democrats are always against cleaning up the voter rolls or having ID to vote or proving who you are, or you're a legal citizen, or you're not a felon, or whatever, before you can vote? Because you can get, like, the worst county in the country, 176%. Let's see, they have, you know what I mean? There's 100,000 legal voters. There have 176,000 registered. So when you start factoring in how many people actually vote versus how all these mysterious ballots showed up, there are twice as many fraudulent ballots, or there could be, as real ballots. And it's not a problem.
Yeah, and I don't understand that, because they did mention that the other night about, well, they had registered to vote, and they voted, but then they died. Okay,
Yeah, well, that's
So now
that's
you've got-
okay.
yeah, and that's okay.
But if you die first, you're not supposed to vote.
Yes.
But they do. Okay.
They're
Now
supposed to vote
some
now.
lady, her and her husband, they'd been married for 200 years. They were both lifelong whatevers. It didn't actually say if they're Republicans or Democrats. She knew his wishes. He died before the election. They had the ballot. She filled it out. Well, that's not legal, but
That isn't.
that's not the same as going through all the rolls of the people who've died for the last 100 years, registering them and voting them.
Yeah.
There was a guy in North Carolina, it was on the news just today. Newsmax, maybe you saw it. The headline was, he voted twice in the election. So that sucks you in. So you get the interview with the guy. He voted on Halloween, October 31st, because he's a busy guy. He voted by mail. And he kept tracking his ballot, and it never showed up, never showed up, never showed up, never showed up. So he called the election board and said, this is what happened. What should I do? And they said, we'll get back to you. And they didn't get back to him. So the day of the election, he called again, talked to somebody, and they said, I'll get back to you in an hour. They called him back, and they said, well, I don't know where it is. Come in and vote. So he went in, they gave him a ballot, not a provisional ballot, a ballot, and he voted it. When, after the election, checked again, the one he sent on Halloween suddenly showed up. So now he's voted twice.
Yeah.
Well, if it's Republican, I bet they arrest him. If it's Democrat, they'll let him vote a couple more times. I don't know. There's a video online that's just a crack up. Black, well, I know the rapper, he's got to be black. A black rapper from Detroit, right? He got a gig as a vote counter. What could go wrong there? So he's videoing himself, and he opens the envelopes, and the process is you open the envelope, you smooth the ballots out because they've been folded, and then you stack them, and then they go into a stacking machine, and it goes into the computer and all that stuff. So he's opening them and stacking them, and then he opens one, and he goes, what? And he holds it up to the camera and says, this guy voted for Trump. And he rips it in half and throws it over his head. Okay, awesome. He's not going to go to jail. Post office officials have been, I can't tell you how many people signed affidavits for this. They have been forced by their supervisors to backdate ballots that arrived after the election to November 3rd. Because after the election, they know how many ballots they need to win, and they just dump them off at the post office, and then the supervisor tells them, oh, you got to backdate those.
One county in Pennsylvania, there were over 1,000 people that voted that hadn't before that were over 100 years old.
It's a pretty good place to live. You live a long time in Pennsylvania. Yeah, 1,000 people over 100 years old. Awesome. They found bags in post offices and in postal carriers' houses and all that stuff. There's bags of ballots. Yeah. She goes through it, it's on video. The guy's videoing himself. He's going around to all the old folks' homes collecting all the ballots. And he's got, 37 ballots in his car or something. They just rip them open, write Trump in, or Trump, yeah, that'll be the day. Biden, and, and these are her people, and they're videotaping themselves doing it. So most states don't allow ballot harvesting, but Minnesota does. So you can do that. Then there's the rumors of the hammer and scorecard. We talked about that, the supercomputer and the software they use to rig elections in foreign countries, flipping hundreds of thousands of ballots. Is there? Well, that South Korea, there's a, and I mentioned this, I think last week, that he's not the current president because he was arrested, but the I guess, previous president was extremely unpopular, and he won in a landslide. But they used Dominion voting systems. So the ballots were flipped. So the guy who got like 12 votes now got 19 million, and of course he won. It's just, it's simple. If it's electronic, it's simple. And most of these places use a phone modem, which any high school kid could hack. None of this stuff is secure. Okay, so I say all this to say, what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? Nothing. You can't do anything about it, except stay focused on the opportunities this is going to create. It's going to create two opportunities. The first one is going to be our good Christian friends who are having a meltdown. They're so focused on the lies and the deceit and the unfairness of Biden being elected, as though there's any difference, that they can't even think straight. We need to focus them back on the things that are important, the only thing that is important. And that's that, do you think anything happens to you that the Lord isn't aware of? Do you think somehow this isn't part of his plan? That when you say, Lord, where are you in all this? And he says, oh, I don't know, what happened? He knows. And of course he knows. So we need to get behind him, work with him, and stop, so the first group of people I think we can affect are the people in our church and our little communities that are just, their minds are blown by how unfair this is. And it is unfair, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
And all the other elections?
Sure, it's always happened, of course. And I mean, these guys, Dominion vote, that the CIA uses them all the time to overthrow people. It's just, and we whine about, government, Russia's getting involved in our election. Well, we're involved in everybody's election. We were going to move to Ecuador. We were seriously going to move to Ecuador. And one of the reasons I liked Ecuador, one of the many reasons, was because the Ecuadorian government hated this government. They loved the people, but they hated the government. And the reason they hated the government is because back in the 70s, they had an election for president. The CIA came in and, wanted this other guy. They were going to put their guy in. Well, the Ecuadorian guy won. Well, they didn't like that. So 12 hours later, he's in his plane with his family and his staff. Boom, the plane blows up. What a coincidence, right? So then they have to get another president. So they get this other guy, the CIA's down there going, no, not that guy, this guy. Well, that guy wins. So his family and staff are in a plane. Boom, the plane blows up. Well, everybody knows it was the CIA, right? Because that's the way we roll. And yet there's this big fairy tale about how Russia's influencing our election, or, Obama was up front about it. He tried to mess with the Israeli election. He hated Netanyahu, still does probably. And he did not want him to be president. He did everything he could do, I'm sure, including the Dominion software. So why is it a big deal that somebody's trying to mess with our election, right? It happens all the time. Once we got past the stage where there were more than 15 people in a room and you could actually count hands, there's never been a fair election. There's no way to make it fair. Anybody can cheat. And people like us would never think of cheating. We don't even think other people cheat, but they do. But they do. They knew exactly how many votes they needed. That's why the Senate of Philadelphia, or not the Senate, the governor and the Secretary of State said that they were going to keep the polls open for 3 days after the election. Well, that's not legal. They can't do that. And they're not the ones that make that decision. The state legislature makes that decision. Well, 3 days after the election, they knew how many ballots they needed. So you just bring them in, have the post office backdate them, boom, it's there. Or you bring them to the polling station, like there's all kinds of videos of them doing. They rip the ballots out of the envelopes, throw the envelopes away. You can't tell now which ballots which are the good ones, which are the bad ones. That's just the way they roll. Okay. So remember too, and this is important. We've talked about this before, but never really in this sort of category. That everything in Scripture, that good always comes from bad, that light comes out of darkness. And he reminds us of that every day, because light comes out of darkness every day. He reminds us of that every week with the end of the week and the Sabbath. He reminds us every month with the moon. He reminds us every year at Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. Psalm 18:11. But he made darkness his secret place. His pavilion round about him were dark waters and thick clouds of the sky. That's where he lives. And we think, oh, he's all light and bright, and he is. But his abode is in darkness. Okay. Let me. Oh gosh. All right. This is on you then, because apparently I've gone too long again. Deuteronomy chapter 4. Remember that Paul told us in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 that we are to look to the Exodus generation. The last generation is to look to the Exodus generation and glean from them what we need to know. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. Read that. It's awesome. These are the followers of the Lord. Now remember, too, I don't know, maybe it's even in here. There's a verse that says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or it's making reference to the patriarchs. They knew me as El Shaddai, the provider God. But they needed to know me as Yahweh. They needed to know me as God, and they did not. And the way they came to know him as God was through this Exodus. So read Deuteronomy chapter 4, at least down to 12 or a little further. And just continue to remember that the noise is from the enemy. The noise is on purpose. No matter which side of this you're on, the noise is designed to take you and me, our eyes off of the things of the Lord. And they've been pretty successful at it, judging by how many emails I've received about stuff that's just wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. But just because it's wrong doesn't mean God doesn't know about it, and it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a purpose for it. So we need to join with him and find out the purpose and use these things to his benefit. And don't get all wigged out about it. So anyway, that's what I have. Anybody have anything else?